we're standing on the precipice of this biggest change in the way businesses operate, in my opinion, since the industrial age.
For those willing to listen, learn, and have eyes to see and ears to hear, this is the Nonpartisan Evangelical, where we're challenging the mindset of right-wing Christianity and encouraging people to have their minds renewed and hearts transformed. Let's have better conversations about the life modeled in the Bible so we can truly tell the world God is not mad at you. This is the Nonpartisan Evangelical Podcast at npepodcast.com.
All right, hi everybody. Pastor Paul here from the Nonpartisan Evangelical Podcast. And Jeremiah 29:7 is a verse in the Bible that says, "Seek the welfare of your city, for in its welfare you'll find your welfare." And I think that's a really important verse in the Bible that says, my peace, my shalom, as they would have called it back in the Hebrew lingo, is based in the peace and shalom of my community around me. And if there's not peace and justice in my community, I don't have peace and justice in my own life. And I think it's a very different viewpoint than many of my friends in the evangelical community view biblical truth that say we're just about saving souls and getting people to heaven. That I think the Bible really is about seeking the common good of our communities. And in doing so, then we can draw people to our spiritual beliefs and otherwise. And so I have a great guest on the podcast today who happens to be a very exciting guest for me personally, because he's somebody I've known a long, long, long time, longer than I care to think about how long it's been. But Jay Wilkinson is the founder of the Do More Good movement, CEO of a company called Firespring, and he's just been doing some great work. I got to attend an event that his group organized recently, and so Jay, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you on. And before we start talking about the movement, I do have to let people know we have known each other a long, long time. In fact, teammates in North Platte High School of the Bulldogs. So it's good to see you again after all these many years.
It is so great to see you. It has been a long time. Yeah, and just as usual, you're like back in the day, Paul was the point guard on our basketball team, so he was the one dishing out the assists and get everybody set up. So thank you for that introduction. Not much has changed. And
you were the one jumping on the hoop. I remember when we won the district championship, Jay jumped up and was sitting on the basket. I don't even know how you got up there.
Well, I just jumped up and grabbed the rim and pulled myself up. I certainly didn't do it in one leap.
Well, those are great memories from back in Western Nebraska. And Jay now has his main office out of Lincoln, Nebraska. And so tell me, the Do More Good movement, what is Do More Good all about? And what are you guys trying to do good in?
Well, most of my time today is spent as the steward, the founder of the Do More Good movement. And the movement exists really as a way to educate, empower, and inspire and to amplify business leaders and companies who are doing more good in the world. And my founding board of advisors, the people that are really influential in bringing all of the stuff that I'm working on together, these are the people who created conscious capitalism and the 1% for the planet movement, which is really something that got started by Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia, and certified B corporations. And the woman that worked in President Obama's White House as the chief legal counsel, her name is Preeta Bansal. She's an amazing human, but she was the person largely instrumental for the creation of benefit corporation legislation, which is now passed in 38 states. So these are the four largest frameworks around putting purpose into business. The belief that there is a triple bottom line, which is what they call it in the conscious capitalism world. It's not just the economic impact, but also the social and environmental impact of our companies that matters. Not solely putting money in the pockets of the shareholders, the owners, but lifting up the communities that those businesses serve, the employees, the vendors, of course, the customers, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe that if every business in the world operated with a mindset that they were focused on how they can lift each other up and and support all of the people that are part of their ecosystem, imagine how different the world would be. And I guess the simplest way that we like to put it inside the movement as we're working on it is we're here to reclaim capitalism. We believe that capitalism has been given a bad rap. You know, if you watch a movie or read a book today or have in the last 20 years, more than 80% of them depict capitalists and business owners and leaders as evil or, you know, ruthless or heartless people. So I understand why that sentiment is out there. But it's actually not all like that. There are some companies and some like you know, there are across anything in the world who have bad intentions, but we just need to focus on the right things in capitalism, and that's what we're focused on doing and building.
So why would a capitalist company want to do this? Why wouldn't they just be focused on profit for themselves and the CEO and the shareholders?
Well, number one, because it's the right thing to do, as you and I know, Paul. But
yeah, it sounds good. It sounds good.
Sounds good. I know. But more importantly, there's some great resources on the why question around this.
Isn't that's the Simon Sinek book, right?
Yeah, Simon Sinek is certainly one of the leaders. You know, he had a great TED talk on the Golden Circle where he talked about the power of the why, and we need to start with the why. But there's also some very specific text and research that's been done in business circles around understanding that companies that pursue a path to purpose in their business are more profitable across the board than businesses and companies that don't do that. Just think about you know, the Gen Zers and even and the Gen Yers that are out in the world today, the millennials that are working in businesses, which is the largest percentage of people in the workforce today. Businesses that don't understand that they need to evolve the way that they do business to take into account all of the people that are part of their ecosystem. My personal opinion is they won't be around. They're not even going to survive 5 to 8 years because no one will want to work for them, and people won't want to buy their products and services. So if survival is a good enough thing for you, that's one reason why. But even more importantly, I don't really believe in the axiom that it's, you know, and you hear this all the time where they say purpose before profit. It's something that you hear in the circles around putting purpose in business. Well, the reality of that is profit because of purpose. There has been so much research that's done now that businesses and their leaders that focus on leading mindful businesses and mindful practices in their businesses make more money, which gives you more resources to impact your community. And if you want to take, you know, a bigger share of those and put them in the pockets of the owners or the shareholders, so be it. But as long as you're focused on all of the stakeholders in a business and not only and solely on the owners.
That's interesting. You know, and so we see examples of this, like Tom Shoes is one of the big leaders of, hey, we give away shoes to people that need shoes, and that's how we make profit. And even cause marketing companies like Starbucks, and you know, those are attracting younger people. And maybe some of these other companies are holding on while the boomers are still alive. But what you're saying is the next generations are just simply going to say no to a company not willing to show that they're giving back to the community. Yeah,
I believe that fervently. I think we have maybe a decade in business to survive until we're able to change the way that not only that we're perceived, but how we really do business. Because, you know, again, we also know that we live in glass houses today. Every business is visible from every perspective and every angle. You cannot do one thing and say something else and be something that you're not. It just simply doesn't work anymore. Those days are gone. So we have to be really intentional about. And I think the word authentic is a little overused in today's business world.
Sure. Yeah. That doesn't mean it's not true though.
But it's real. We have to be, you know, we have to be the real version of who we are, rather than, you know, 3 or 4 separate curated versions of who we want to be known as.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And when I get to talk to a lot of young people in what I do now, and you're talking about Gen Z and Gen Y and millennials who are not so young anymore. But one of the big scare words that goes around a lot in our culture now is socialism, and I hear that as a buzzword to try to scare people into votes. But to me, the real threat of socialism may be if we don't go the direction you're talking about, that a generation may say, capitalism isn't working for us anymore. And I actually hear that coming out of the mouths of young people. And so I do find it interesting. You're saying you're trying to save capitalism by bringing this generosity into it.
Yeah. And it is true. There are aspects of capitalism that are not working without question. The rich have become richer in the last 18 months as the pandemic, has spread its tentacles out on society. There's no question about that. It's really more cronyism and corporatism that causes the challenges and the issues that we see. Capitalism, we like to call it Main Street capitalism. I come from Nebraska. My family settled there in the 1800s. My great-grandfather was friends of Buffalo Bill in our hometown of North Platte, going way back into the day. And one thing that is often said about the settlers of the American Midwest is that they were hardy people. They were resilient. They were able to live and work in harsh environments, and they did that by taking care of each other, by being there for one another. And that's the kind of capitalism that I think America needs to reclaim. It's the kind of capitalism where we are there for one another, where we're taking care of each other, we have each other's backs. And so one of the fundamental foundational tenets of the Do More Good movement is the abundance mindset. It's the opposite of what Stephen Covey used to call the scarcity mindset, when we think that we have to hoard everything we can and keep it for ourselves. I believe, and we believe in this movement, that the rising tide lifts all boats. There are so many references to Christianity and biblical references in what we believe in. But we're an agnostic organization. We believe that people should be good to other people because it's the right thing to do.
Why join the Pastor Paul NPE Patreon community? Because it's where all the nonpartisan deconstructing interaction happens. On the NPE Patreon page with Pastor Paul, you get special regular E-Inspire content that you can't get anywhere else. You get access to our podcast guests that aren't available to the public. There are special Zoom sessions with Ashley and me and previews to what's coming next in the Pastor Paul world. You're invited into the private NPE Facebook discussion group, and there's access to the audiobook version of Paul's novel, Joseph Comes to Town, which isn't available anywhere else in the entire world. And at higher levels of commitment, we can have one-on-one visits together or even coaching from my Pastor Paul coaching curriculum. The number one reason, though, to join the NPE Patreon community with Pastor Paul, to help promote this message, my message, that God is not mad at the world. Your subscription helps fund the Pastor Paul work so we can bring this message to everyone, everywhere. So help support the Pastor Paul Nonpartisan Evangelical Patreon community. Join the Pastor Paul NPE Patreon page and enjoy the benefits of your subscription today. And help me, Pastor Paul, share with those who have lost their faith community and need to know that God is not mad at them. Go to our website on Patreon at patreon.com/NPE podcast. That's patreon.com/NPE podcast. And you hit something there, the rising tide idea. And my wife was mayor of our city for 2 terms. And that really came about because we looked at our city, said, hey, we're going to live here. We're going to raise our kids here. Very impoverished city in the middle of the most prosperous state in the country. And said, hey, if we raise the standard of living for everybody, it's going to raise the rents we can charge on houses and in offices and things like that. So it really is, there is a return on this investment, just like you guys say.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, Ashley is well known. In fact, I shared
Ashley's my wife, by the way,
yes,
for anybody
yeah,
that doesn't know. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. I will share with you that I was sharing your book with some friends of mine. One of them,
wow, thank you. That's awesome.
Of course. One of them in particular, her father is a pastor, and she said, "How is my dad going to be when he reads this?" And she was trying to get into the right mindset. And then I shared with her that your wife, the author's wife, is Ashley Swearingen, president. And she had this. She was like, she's like the Leslie Knope of the West Coast. So you should share that.
She will love that.
You should share that with her. It was pretty touching, actually. And Leslie Knope is one of my all-time favorite characters in any sitcom ever. So I found that to be a great compliment.
She'll love that. Leslie Knope from what's the name of the series again?
Oh,
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec. Yep. Thank you.
Right up there with Jed Bartlett from West Wing, who happens to be one of my favorites. That is awesome. Well, I will tell Ashley that, and she'll be very excited. So you're talking about this is kind of a young people thing and a little bit young person focused. You and I are not exactly spring chickens anymore. So how did you get inspired to be the founder of the Do More Good movement? What inspired you into this?
So my company, FireSpring, was the first certified B corporation in Nebraska. That happened in 2014, and that was mostly driven by my desire to do something for my father, who's my mentor, my hero in North Platte, where I grew up. He was my scoutmaster and my youth coach and all sports and all that stuff. He was just an incredible human, still is an incredible human, but an incredible role model as a father for me to learn from. And I remember having a conversation with my brothers. This would have been like 2012, 2013, about what can we do for dad to leave a legacy. We were talking about things like, hospital wing named after him or name a park after him. And someday, I kept saying that word, someday I'm going to build a business big enough or save up enough money that we can do something really amazing to honor, dad's legacy. And then I remember it had to be 2013 Thanksgiving. I was having a conversation with him, my dad, and he started laughing at me saying, "What are you asking me all these questions about legacy for?" I was trying to pin him down to kind of figure out what would get him really excited. And all he cared about was that his kids, his grandkids and his great grandkids grew up to be, great contributors to society and were happy and healthy. It's all he cared about. And I kept asking myself, well, what am I waiting for? Why am I waiting for someday to do something for him when I can be focused on doing that now, and maybe in smaller ways rather than big grand ways? And that's when we became a certified B Corp at my company.
And you said you were the first certified B Corp in all of the state?
In the state of Nebraska, yes.
Wow.
And so we really doubled down on business as a force for good, if you want to call it that. And we grew the business really fast. We were featured in Inc. magazine as one of the 50 best places to work in America. And, we all know that those things are like you send in your application, you have to have good marketing people, whatever. So I don't put a lot of faith in those kind of things. But and certainly we weren't one of the best 50 in all of America to work for. But I was really proud of what we accomplished. And I started speaking about it a lot. I had a TED Talk that ended up with like more than 1 million views on company culture and started to grow.
Yeah, I saw that. It's very good.
And I started talking a lot about culture. And then I had somebody stand up at one of my events somewhere. And they said, "Jay, what's the future of workplace culture going to be?" And I said, "I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know, but it's really an interesting question. What's it going to be like in another 5 years?" So I started a research project. Fast forward a couple of years, I had interviewed more than 1,000 CEOs and leaders of purpose-driven companies all over North America, US and Canada, and started to find that all of these things that they were talking about, they kept using words like love and vulnerability and gratitude and kindness and things that they lived as a business for. And I realized that it wasn't just about company culture, that we're standing on the precipice of this biggest change in the way businesses operate, in my opinion, since the industrial age. There's something really dramatic afoot. And that's when I came up with this notion that somebody needs to make sense out of all of this, because at that time, all of these different frameworks exist, like certified B Corp, 1% for the planet. But there really wasn't anyone focused on that last mile of education, helping business leaders and owners understand, how do I do this? How do I go from where I am now? I'm trying to make payroll, and you're trying to tell me I should be, trying to take care of the little old lady down the street. It's not making sense. Mm-hmm. So we started working on, how can we educate business leaders on this? And that's what our whole mantra is about, being that last mile. We're not trying to create something new. We're not trying to invent anything that has never been heard of before. We're trying to just make sense of everything that's there in a way that's step-by-step applicable, so a business owner can learn exactly what options they have and then what steps they need to take in order to pursue a path to purpose. So that's kind of where the whole thing came from.
And you do conferences. How do you do this training? You do it individually with companies?
Yeah, so our focus is on workshops, and we're launching those workshops in August of this year. So we haven't begun conducting them yet. We've been working on curriculum, case studies, best practices, all kinds of things up till now. And the workshops will be anywhere from a couple of hours to all-day workshops, mostly physically present. We're partnering with chambers of commerce organizations all over America. And we're going to do several virtually as well. So people will be able to sign up virtually. And again, that will all launch in August of this year, when we'll have a slew of materials out about how to get signed up and involve yourself. And
are you finding companies open to this? And like you say, I know what it's like to try to make a payroll on a monthly or bi-monthly basis,
Paul, it's really interesting. I've yet to speak with anyone who doesn't understand what it is that we're focused on. There are certainly lots of people that aren't believers in it. Certainly lots of people who believe that the sole purpose of business is to make money. And that's there. I don't want to go too deep into a history lesson, but there are a lot of business leaders over the years who have said that the sole purpose of a business is to make money. Milton Friedman's the one who said that back in the 70s, and even before that. Well, it was one of his graduate students, John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, that actually spearheaded the movement of the conscious capitalism framework around the triple bottom line, because he didn't think his professor had it right. And so it's what's happening is that people are slowly learning and understanding that this is the only way that we're going to survive, that capitalism will survive, the assault that it's been under for the last decade plus, is for it to evolve and change. But there are still a lot of people in that framework, in that mix, who are not convinced. So I'd say about 20% of our job is the convincing, but for those that are unconvincible, we're moving right on, and we're going to be focused on the 80% that understand that there is something there.
Oh, that's awesome. And for me, and this is a podcast for Christians or people who are sort of deconstructing that belief system. And I think the Bible's very clear that this is a basic way of living. But I don't ever think any of the rules of the Bible are because God just wanted to give us rules. I think generosity does have a return. The Bible says, cast your bread on the water and it'll come home to you. And so I think the premise is generosity not only has a financial return, which I believe it does, but it has a purposeful return of well-being for us. Mm-hmm. And I do well-being coaching with people, and what I've found for all of us, what we want is we want safety, value, and purpose in our life. We want to know we're safe. We want to know there are people that value us, and we exist because they love us. And then we need to find out, why do I exist? Mm-hmm. And so I hear in what you're saying, then I think once you start to have a purpose that's bigger than your world and your little space, that's where well-being starts to come in. And I start being able to have this come back to me spiritually, mentally, physically, and become a person that can withstand the good days and the not so good days. So I don't know, do you see any sort of spiritual and mental part of this as well, other than just financial?
like 100% alignment with what you're talking about. One of the things that we talk about all the time within the paradigms of the Do More Good movement is that people at a basic level desire to be seen and heard. They want to be able to contribute. They want to add value, to your point, and they want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. As business leaders, if we can give that to people, we're giving them a huge boost up in life and confidence and just quality of life and relationships and friendships. So there are so many parallels. Yeah, absolutely.
I love this. And we were talking before we came on. This has been in the midst of sort of a spiritual journey for you. What has that spiritual journey been like as you're walking through this as a vocational world, and sort of where do you land in that spiritual journey today?
Oh my goodness.
A light, easy question for you.
It's awesome. I grew up in Nebraska, a small Midwestern town where, that was founded on religious principles, as all of our towns across America were. And I came of age in the late 70s. Paul, we probably met in 1980? When did you move to North Platte?
Yeah, 80. As a sophomore in high school, moved to North
that's
Platte.
Right.
Yeah.
So Paul comes swaggering into the gym. He's dribbling the basketball behind his back, and then none of us knew how to do that yet. Yeah, and he was showing us all kinds of fancy tricks. But so somewhere in the early 80s, I was coming of age and really learning about who I was. I'd spent at that point in my life going to church every Sunday with my family. I was confirmed in the same Missouri Synod Lutheran Church that my mother and grandmother and great grandmother were all confirmed in. Going, all the way back.
Wow.
I was really active in campus life, which had a really great chapter in North Platte, and it was just right up the street from where I lived. When I went to college, I remember learning about the laws of reciprocity from Jim and Tammy Baker back.
Wow.
In the days. and got really excited about reciprocity and as a theme in my life. I got married to a Catholic and agreed to then raise my children in the Catholic Church and even go to a Catholic school later on. But then it was probably in the early 2000s when my whole journey shifted pretty dramatically. And I think what I remember in the early 2000s is kind of when a lot of the news was breaking around the molestation charges in the Catholic among Catholic priests. And then, the drumbeat started to get louder. In 2005, one of the hardest things, in fact, without question, the hardest thing I've ever endured as a human is I went through a divorce in 2005. My former wife is an amazing human, like salt of the earth, amazing human. She's a special education teacher who works with students that are really having a hard time reading. And she's done that her entire life. She's, again, just a remarkable, amazing human. But we were so different. We got married too young. I wanted to travel the world. I literally, I had a goal to have a meaningful experience in 100 countries and scuba dive all over the world. I got certified to scuba when I was 16, and she preferred to, read books and kind of stay at home. And we didn't align with what we wanted out of life. So we went through a divorce. And it was all my doing. It wasn't hers. And in order for us to go through that process, I actually had to go sit down with a priest and boldface lie to him. And I still think about that being one of the things that I don't know if I regret or I'm embarrassed, because I don't know what the right words are, but it was so difficult for me in order for her to remarry in the eyes of the church, at least. And she had to prove grounds for an annulment. And like the only way that in my conversation with her that I could think is, well, I'll just go tell the priest that I've been unfaithful. And I actually had to take it a step further and say I had no intention of ever being faithful in order for her to get the annulment.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like the ickiest feeling, that pit in your stomach feeling that was almost as deep as the frustration, regret, and sadness, the despair that I was feeling from the divorce. I was feeling it in this having to lie.
You're lying to a priest. That's a big deal.
Yeah. And it was a big deal. And I those things kind of led me down a path where I guess the simplest way, to put it is that that's what kind of I departed from the church, but then several other things happened. I went through a long time of just really juggling, and I didn't know what my spiritual journey was. I didn't think about it a lot. I was just trying to grow my business and live my life. And then I got remarried in 2007. So I've been 14 years now, and to the perfect partner for me. My life is so good with Tanya, my wife, and we go on journeys all around the world. We have now been, I think we're on 56 out of our 100 meaningful destinations.
Wow.
We have so much fun, but about a decade ago, we started going to Burning Man, which is a festival in the middle of the Nevada desert.
Right.
Where 70,000 people from around the world come together, and the primary theme is radical inclusion, radical acceptance, no judgment. You come together with people, and people can be whomever they want to be. There are lots of, representatives from every religion around the world there, and just these amazing opportunities to connect with people. And then I had this random thing that happened. I think it was around 2015. My wife and I were at the Harvard campus in Boston. We were just walking around. We had no reason to be there other than we thought it'd be fun to just walk through the campus. And there was this big building that was all lit up. And I wonder what's going on there. So we walked up. There were some people coming out of the front, and we just kind of walked in, and there was a sign that said Salman Rushdie, who was doing a presentation there. And we didn't have tickets, but at that point they'd stopped. The ticket takers had gone in to sit down. So we just kind of snuck in, sat down somewhere in the back row.
Let me jump in. So Rushdie wrote Satanic Verses, right?
Yes.
Which is sort of an, I don't know, anti-Muslim. Is that a right characterization?
Yeah, it was, I think that's a fair characterization. He was calling out Muslim theory for what he felt was, were really good reasons. And yeah, he was put on, I think Al-Qaeda had him on their hit list for years. He was in hiding forever. So it was really weird to see his name. I didn't really know anything about him before he went in and sat down. But I heard, and actually my wife and I were some of those asking questions in the back of the room. And after it was over, we went up and chatted with him a little bit, and then ended up having a cocktail with him and a couple other people afterwards.
Wow.
So we had this really great, deep conversation. And I think what his philosophy is really grounded in humanism, for lack of a better word. And I really appreciated what he had to say, and it really kind of changed the way I started to think. And then, in 2016, the emergence of the alt-right entered into mainstream politics. Donald Trump came onto the scene, and oh man, Paul, don't even get me started. I will never understand in my lifetime why people who profess to be a Christian, and in many cases because they're a Christian,
right,
they spew hate and exclusion instead of planting seeds of love and inclusion. I will never in a million years understand how that came to be. And that's kind of what did it for me. I think so. In the last several years, I've been really I have dear friends that follow the tenets of Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism, and I love them all, and I respect and admire those in particular who are open-minded and use their faith to sow seeds of love in the world and not hate. And so I'm fully aware that this is one man's view, but I believe that no religion has a monopoly on the truth, that each of us need to find the truth that lives within us so that we can have a moral code to live by. We can be a source of knowledge and morality without having to have someone else tell us what to do. That's kind of where I've landed on things.
That's interesting, and what my Christian friends to hear out of that is leaning toward a humanist view, and humanist is another one of those scary words. A view that values humanity. We've been having an argument about flying a pride flag over our city council building here in Fresno. And I've been trying to tell people this isn't a political issue. This is a human issue we're talking about. We're just talking about affirming human beings. and that should be above politics. So, but it's like you say, it's almost mind-boggling to me. But I have Christian friends that say nothing good can happen if you don't have Jesus in your life. And you're a great example of somebody that's been through that spiritual journey, and because of that, are being inspired to do good things. So I love that story. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
It's good stuff. Well, so what, by the way, I know far too well why Christians love Donald Trump, and exactly as you say, because of their Christianity. And that's what I'm trying to convince people. No, that's a really bad interpretation of who God is and what he wants to do in the world. And hopefully we're changing that a little bit. So what's the future now for you and the Do More Good movement? What's coming up?
Well, we, as I mentioned a bit ago, in August, we're going to launch our workshop series.
Yep.
We are in the process of building the world's largest repository of best practices, ideas, and inspiration for business leaders at all sizes and all types to understand what it means to be a purpose-driven business. We've partnered with a couple of journalism schools who are going to be having their students go to work on helping create these stories. We're really excited about those partnerships. And our next physically present conference, where we're bringing people in from around the world, but mostly from the U.S., will happen in May of 2022. And so I love having lots of different viewpoints and different perspectives at those kind of events. So that's our big conference every year, is in May. And we had over 750 folks from 70 countries around the world attend our virtual conference last May, just a few weeks ago. It was fascinating because we didn't set out to have an international conference. It was really, we're really focused right now in the United States and Canada. We are not yet focused on helping propagate our message outside of North America, because we want to stay focused here, where we can have the deepest impact on the backyards where our employees and our ecosystem is located. So it was really a surprise when we got all these registrations from around the world. This is a topic that people are hungry for, and they want to learn more about it.
So where do people find you and find the movement?
Yeah, they can find it at domoregood.com. If you go to domoregood.com, we have a sister organization, domoregood.org, that focuses on the nonprofit sector. That's really focused on helping train, educate, and elevate nonprofits on how to be better stewards of their mission. But my day-to-day focus is on the domoregood.com, the movement around putting purpose in business.
That is awesome. And I have to tell people, this is an insider story for you and me, and nobody else may care, but I read the Forbes magazine story about you over the weekend, and it's just funny for me to think this was kind of initially, this flame inspired in you when we went to a leadership camp. Yes. as school council leaders from our school at this leadership camp. Is that right?
It is. Paul and I were both.
You were getting inspired. I was chasing girls. You were getting inspired to change the world. That tells you the difference between you and me.
So I will share with anyone listening today that the thing that put me over the top is saying, okay, I'll go to this leadership camp, which sounds like a horrible thing for a 16, 15-year-old to have to endure. But we got elected to serve on student council, but that was the penance we had to pay. You have to go to leadership camp and learn how to be a leader. But when we learned that it was like 70% female, Paul and I were like high-fiving and like, yep, we're there.
Yeah.
and that was the only reason we ended up going. But it did, Paul. And I know you remember a lot of aspects from that, but it changed my life. There was a sign. They put us into these groups called co-ops, group of 12 students from all over the state of Nebraska and actually the Midwest. And it was the first time that I really came face to face with people from other ethnicities and from diverse backgrounds, because there weren't a lot of that, in
North Platte,
our hometown, or in my hometown, and there just wasn't a lot of diversity. But so it was the first time I really got to learn about all kinds of other cultures. And at the end of the week, my leader of my group, they called it a co-op leader, the leader of my group, allowed me to take this sign off the wall. And the sign, so it was a Stephen Grillet quote, And it said, I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. That sign still hangs on my mirror in my bathroom at home. I see it every day. And quite honestly, the foundation that I got from that sentiment is the ethos that I use to create Firespring, my company. It's the ethos that is really the precedent for what has become the Do More Good movement. It has become just a really important mindset that I've embraced and adopted my entire life. I still go back. This summer,
that's right.
2021, we went in 1981. That's going to date us, Paul. Sorry about that. It's 40 years ago. This summer is when I attended my first ever workshop for Launch Leadership. That's the name of the organization. So if you want to learn more about them, you can go find out more at launchleadership.org, by the way.
So cool.
It's a great
40 years. My God. My God. It's hard to believe.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Class of 1983. And geez, that's a long, long time ago. Well, Jay, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed learning more about what you're doing, and I'm proud to know you. It's been fun reconnecting with you. And so thanks for giving us this time. I know your time is very valuable, so I really appreciate it.
Well, talking about proud to know you, Paul, if you know how many people that I've talked about with you and the incredibly courageous work that you're doing, in all sincerity, I'm so in awe of you and your choices and your leadership around this. Our country, our world needs your messages more now than anything. And so thank you for doing what you do, for what it's worth.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you so much for that, Jay. Jay Wilkinson, founder of the Do More Good movement. domoregood.com is where you can find him and check it out. So thank you guys for being with me on the podcast today. We'll look forward next time on the Nonpartisan Evangelical Podcast from pastor-paul.com.